Well, hi there, and welcome to another episode of Insights with NetSupport. I'm Al Kingsley, host for this session. I'm Group CEO of NetSupport, but chair of a multi-academy trust and an alternative provision academy in the UK, and like to write, like many people, around all sorts of topics educational. But the purpose of this show is always to gather insights from around the world from interesting and like-minded people. And I'm really excited today to introduce our guest, Kailey Lefko. Kailey, welcome.
Hi, Al. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to connect with you and with your community.
It is my pleasure. Really looking forward to talking to you on this topic. I'm not going to go through all the details about your journey. I will leave you to share some of those. The most important ones, I guess, that stand out and will maybe shape our conversation today are your role as co-founder of Educalme, and that in itself is a pretty cool name. So good choice on that one. And also being co-host of the podcast, The Balanced Educator, as well. And I know you share lots of views and experiences with many interesting people on your podcast as well. So it is nice to have a fellow podcaster I can chew the fat with today and share some topics. So
yeah, I'm so excited to be here.
For those listening to podcasts and our listeners, which perhaps don't always cover the same geographical region as you, Kailey, although I'm sure there's some overlap in that listener Venn diagram. Would you mind sharing a little bit of a background about you, and then we can dive into some of the most important parts of this conversation?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Kailey Lefko. I'm a teacher and the co-founder of Educalme, co-host of the Balanced Educator podcast. So a little bit about me. When I first started teaching, I was so excited to be a science and math teacher and share my passion for the sciences. When I got into the classroom, I felt totally prepared to teach really great lessons. I knew how to build an engaging lesson that was inclusive. I knew how to build my curriculum for the year. I felt so prepared for that. What I realized quickly that I wasn't prepared for was the social emotional needs of my students. So I learned really quickly that when I came into the classroom in the morning, my students weren't necessarily ready to learn. They were coming in with their own life stories. Each of those 25 plus students in my classroom might have had a challenging morning. They might have stuff going on with friend groups. They might have stuff going on with their family. When they come into the classroom, they have emotions that might be blocking their brain from being ready to learn. So I was noticing this in my students. And at the same time, I was noticing that I was feeling really stressed. And as a new teacher, I was putting my everything into this exciting career, pouring everything into my students and supporting them, that I was nearing burnout. And here in Canada, about 30 to 40% of teachers leave the profession in the first 5 years. And I didn't want to be one of the statistics. So I was in search of something that could support my mental health and well-being so I could be the best version of myself for my students. So I discovered mindfulness. And what I loved about this practice was that it was so short, easy to integrate into my daily routine. And I got such large dividends from this short practice. So I was noticing huge changes in my ability to manage my stress, my anxiety, my big emotions. I was gaining all of these little tools that were supporting me in supporting my students. So as I was becoming more emotionally intelligent for myself, my own self-regulation, I was also better able to support my students. So there was this two sides of the same problem, which was I was stressed and my students were stressed, and neither of us were necessarily ready for effective teaching and learning when we got into the classroom. So what could we do? Because mindfulness was working for me, I was like, I'm going to try this with my students. So over the course of several years, I really dug deep into mindfulness, how to teach it to kids. I was learning a lot about the brain, how the brain learns, the effects of stress on the body, and how we can turn that negative stress into positive stress. So I was experimenting. And I eventually found this strategy, this formula that really worked. I was seeing huge differences in my students in their ability to self-regulate, in their ability to return to focus, in their ability to manage their own emotions and behaviors. So behavior management became so much easier in my classroom. Then I started having my peers come into my classroom and say, wow, this is supposed to be the air quotes tough group. Why are they so engaged? Why are they so focused? Why is it so calm in here? What are you doing? What's your secret? So I would explain, oh, it's really easy. We're just doing a 2 to 5 minute mindfulness practice at the beginning of each class, and it gets my students' brains and bodies ready for learning. And then I was always met with kind of this blank stare or this fear, like, I don't have time to learn that. I don't know how to do that. I'm not the expert in this. So around the same time, my best friend and teaching colleague, Josiane, she was experimenting in the same way that I was. We were coming together. What's working for you? I tried this, I tried that. And she was teaching in primary, elementary ages, and I was teaching in high school, secondary school. And so we were, finding this formula that worked for all ages. And finally, we said, we need to develop something that helps teachers to do this in their classrooms, something that's going to help teachers not have to be the expert in mindfulness and social emotional learning, but they can learn alongside their students and co-regulate their emotions at the beginning of class, learn strategies that help both of them, so both teachers and students can be more effective in the classroom. So that's why we built Educalme. It is an evidence-based social emotional and mindfulness program that supports student and teacher well-being, which leads to better academic success. And then I also have the podcast, the Balanced Educator podcast, where I share all about mindfulness, social emotional learning, well-being, and how to support yourself as a teacher and how to support your students.
I get a hint of enthusiasm coming out from your conversation there. It's almost
Just
like
a
you're
little bit,
really
hey?
committed to this. Yeah, and obviously I say in jest, it's very refreshing, and it's lovely to hear your passion behind that. I almost feel like I need to have my notepad ready as a novice mindfulness person, and I some years ago undertook a bit of training that was very much just about taking the moment and just focusing on the breathing and not letting those other topics pop into your head and distract you, just to bring yourself down. And I have to confess, I was quite dismissive of the benefits, but it's amazing how if you integrate that into your routine, how those small moments can just help you get that base before you move on to the next challenge or conversation. Wearing my hat as chair of a multi-academy trust, a cluster of schools here in the east of England, one of the biggest challenges we've had, certainly as we look at the back end of the pandemic, has very much been around the national narrative of catch up on missed learning versus the reality check, which is actually we need to get our young people's social, emotional, mental health back in a place where they're actually in the right mindset and frame of mind for learning. And the priority has been much more around that. So this is a topic that really interests me. So I'm looking forward to digging a bit deeper and asking you for some insights and some examples maybe that you can share with our listeners. If it's okay with you, Kailey, I'm going to dive in with the first one, which is very much so we can build our checklist of your advice and wisdom. So I'm interested in the types of strategies that you use, that you've identified that work with your challenging group that clearly aren't that challenging now that they're working alongside that. And also the different kinds of approaches in a more physical sense, the tools, the configuration, colors, the things that you bring together that really shape that secret formula that you've identified.
Yes, absolutely. I'll get right into what does this actually look like in my classroom? Because that's what teachers want to know. How can I do this? What does it look
Yeah.
like? Um, So before I get into that, I just want to touch on one point that you made, which is about how we feel this rush right now to get forward, play catch up with the academics, yet our students aren't ready because they have, big social emotional needs that are blocking the brain's ability to learn in this moment. So you can look at this in two ways. Do we push, push, push to try to move forward with the academics and ignore the social emotional learning because we don't have time for that? Or can we look at it differently? And I like to look at this as the slingshot effect. So if you're holding a slingshot with a rock, and the rock is your students that you're trying to help move forward in academics, you can say, you know what, I don't have time to pull this slingshot back to get my students soaring forward. I don't have time. There's no time. We have to move forward with the academics. So I'm just going to kind of let go of that rock and let it fall. Or you can say, you know what, I'm going to devote 5 minutes every day to my student social emotional learning. We're now pulling back that slingshot, getting our students ready to learn, warming up the brain and the body, getting the body brain ready to learn, so that then once we let go, those academics can soar because we've taken that momentum, we've created the momentum that allow our students to move forward. So I know for teachers, the first thing is almost always, I don't have time for this. There's already so much on my plate. What I want to show is how easy and simple this can be, and how it's going to actually give you more time. And interestingly enough, we've had our program studied, and one of the questions we asked the teachers using our program was, how does this program, how does practicing social emotional learning and mindfulness in your classroom every day using Educalme affect time? We just left it open. And 100% of the teachers that responded said that it gave them more time, which is the complete opposite of what we think when we first come to this practice. I don't have enough time. Well, actually, it's going to give you more time. So let's get into what this looks like. So first and foremost, you are going to decide, how does this routine look? So when we're practicing mindfulness, what we're doing is practicing paying attention to the present moment on purpose with openness and curiosity. So there's lots of different ways to do this. And with the Educalme program, we do it for you, so you don't have to know how. But there's lots of different ways of practicing this. Oftentimes, kind of the most basic practice is paying attention to the sensations in your body. Now, when you do that, you're cueing into what's actually happening right now in the present moment, because your 5 senses exist in the present moment. You're also going to notice that you're going to have a lot of thoughts. Your brain is a thinking machine. It's what it's built to do. It's going to think. We can't stop the thinking, but what we can do over time is direct the thinking and pay attention to the thoughts that we have and how it affects how our body's feeling. So our thoughts create emotions, feelings in our body, and then those feelings create actions, our behaviors. So if we can look at that triangle, thoughts, how is that creating feelings in my body? Now, how do I behave based on those feelings? If we're continually every day kind of just studying this in ourselves, we start to begin to notice our cycles. We start to begin to notice, oh, you know what, when I'm feeling tired, I tend to have a hard time focusing. When I'm feeling stressed, it's hard for me to stay on task. I get a little bit angry, and maybe I have behaviors that are affecting the whole classroom when I'm feeling upset. So it's allowing this self-study within our students. So back to how this looks in the classroom. We're creating a routine to practice this a little bit every day. We don't want to jump in and do 30 minutes of mindfulness. That's too much. That's not sustainable. 2 to 5 minutes tops. And you're doing it every day, so we're building skills over time. And by the end of the semester, of the school year, that's when you're seeing these big changes in your students from beginning to end, because they're building small skills over time. Also, as you're doing this practice, you're going to be learning breathing strategies to help you find calm and refocus. You're going to be understanding the brain better, because we teach you about the brain and how it learns and how our emotions affect our thoughts, etc. So you're going to be learning all these skills that allow you and your students to better be able to self-regulate, manage your emotions and behaviors independently without the support, needing the support or less support from teachers. So we're building these skills over time, which then you can integrate into your teaching. So say, 30 minutes into class, students are doing some independent study, and you're recognizing the energy kind of getting chaotic in here. Students are no longer focused. You can pause and say, hey, I've noticed that the volume is going up in here. There's some chatting going on. It seems like you're having a hard time focusing. What can we do to be ready to do our best work again? And your students are most likely going to say, you know what, my body feels like I have too much energy. Can we do some mindful movement? Can we move our bodies a little bit so that we can then refocus our mind? Or can we do the 5-finger breathing strategy, which only takes, 30 seconds. And then that'll help us return to calm and focus. So this routine is building skills that then get used throughout the day. So now what does the routine look like? I personally really like to have our mindfulness practice as part of the startup routine in class. So in a high school classroom, what that looks like is my students, the routine is they come into the classroom, they put their things down, they chat with their friends as they're kind of getting themselves set up. And then at the start of class, I say, all right, everyone, distractions away, get into a comfortable position. You can choose to participate or just sit quietly and relax. Now is time for Educalme. And then I press play on the guided mindfulness practice. We listen together. Right after, we have a little discussion. It's kind of like a morning meeting. We say, and I ask the question, same question every time, what did you notice today? Now, this is really effective because now I'm having the opportunity to connect with my students one-on-one. This only takes a couple minutes. We go through the classroom and I actually do attendance or roll call at the same time. So I'll go through my list and I'll say, Johnny, good morning. What did you notice today? And Johnny might say, I notice I'm feeling really tired today. I'll say, oh yeah, sometimes when we practice mindfulness, that helps us to recognize how we're feeling and you're feeling tired. Thanks for sharing. The next person, how are you doing this morning? What did you notice? I noticed that I really don't like practicing mindfulness. It's so boring. Yeah, sometimes mindfulness can feel really boring. I felt that way in the beginning and I feel like that sometimes too. Thanks for sharing. Move on to the next. That made me feel really calm. Yeah, sometimes it makes us feel calm. Thanks for sharing. And we go through and all emotions and experiences are welcome because that is the practice of mindfulness. It's just observing the present moment with openness, curiosity, and non-judgment. Now, in this process, I get the opportunity to recognize, oh, Johnny's feeling really tired today. Okay, maybe, this has been several days in a row. Maybe at the end of class, I'm just going to chat with him and say, hey, what's going on? You've been tired a lot. What's going on? And then maybe they'll say, I've been playing video games till 3 a.m. all week. And I'll say, okay, so how's that working out for you? And then we can have a discussion and I can support them so that, they have a coach that can help them to be their best selves when they're entering the classroom. So that's what it looks like. It's part of the routine. They know it's coming. It's short and simple, something guided that I just press play. So I don't have to plan a lesson. I'm not planning anything. I'm not using extra time and I'm regulating my emotions with them. And then step 3 is we're just connecting, having a little morning meeting at the end. And that's what it looks like in my classroom.
Kailey, you make it sound so simple and so easy. and sometimes the simplest things are once you actually understand the steps to take and you've got, as you're sharing, the right resources, suddenly it goes from being a challenge to being much easier. I wanted to talk to you about mindfulness, not least because I'm distinctly an amateur and you're an expert on this topic. But I suspect we've all got slightly different interpretations of what we mean by mindfulness. So I'm interested if you wouldn't mind just explaining from your perspective the process of actually teaching mindfulness. And I'm
Yeah,
going to pay
so
attention and be really calm at the same time.
perfect. So mindfulness is the practice of paying attention to the present moment on purpose with openness, curiosity, and non-judgment. So I like to think of mindfulness as this opportunity to be a scientist where I'm just observing myself. I'm noticing my body. I'm noticing my emotions. I'm noticing my thoughts. None of them are right or wrong. They're just part of human nature. Brains think. Brains are prediction machines. Oftentimes, they're looking for problems to solve. Even if there aren't problems there, it might create some problems. That's just how the brain works. So with mindfulness, we aren't trying to stop our thoughts. We aren't trying to even necessarily feel calmer. Oftentimes, that's the result of paying attention to how we're feeling. But there's no, like, this is how it should look at the end. It's just a daily practice of self-study, checking in with ourselves, of being with ourselves, which is, how often do we do that in this day and age where we have so many things to distract us from our emotions? I'm feeling stressed, I'm gonna scroll Instagram. I'm feeling worried, I'm gonna go watch TV to numb that worry. So it's this kind of training process of actually meeting ourselves. Like, hi Kailey, how you doing today? Can I be here for you today? Can I sit with you and just allow you to be who you are with no judgment? So if you'd like, we can go through a short mindfulness practice right now.
Why not? Why not?
Let's do it. All right, so sit in a comfortable position. There's no right or wrong way to sit. Just sit in a way that feels good. You can choose to close your eyes, or you can just gaze down towards your feet. There's no right or wrong. Just check in with yourself, what feels best. Now begin to just breathe softly through your nose. No need to change or alter the way that you're feeling, the way that you're breathing. Just noticing what it feels like to breathe. Imagine now that you have a flashlight in your mind. Shine this flashlight at your feet. See if you can discover, how are your feet feeling right now? And try to notice something that maybe you've never noticed before. Do they feel heavy or light? Hot or cold? Do you notice any tingling? There's no right or wrong. Just noticing whatever you notice. And as thoughts come into your mind, that's okay. That's normal. Just notice the thought and come back to your flashlight of awareness. Point that flashlight now at your stomach. Notice your belly maybe filling and softening with your breath. Notice if you have any sensations. Sometimes our stomach can feel like there's butterflies or knots, or we're hungry. There's no right or wrong. Just be curious about what's there for you today. Now shine that flashlight at your heart, the space around your heart. Maybe you feel your heart beating. Maybe you feel a sensation that feels light, open, or heavy and closed. Just notice with compassion whatever you're feeling. Now shine that light at your hands. Notice any sensations there. Next, shine that light at your face. Notice the muscles in your face. See if you can soften them, melt them. Now backing up and shining that flashlight of awareness on your entire body at once. Just notice how you're feeling today, as though you're checking in with a good friend, with openness, curiosity, and non-judgment. And to end our practice, let's take a deep breath together, inhaling through your nose and exhale out of your nose. And when you're ready, Gently blink your eyes open or direct your gaze upwards. And just notice how you feel. So Al, I'd love to know now, what did you notice during that practice?
That was the first time today that I've had a chance to pause and just actually get back in the moment. So from that point of view, it was very nice just to pause and gather thoughts. I try to do something similar, but I find the sense of actually focusing on my body allows me not to let other things pop into my head, and that's the value in many regards for me. But I think it's easy in our busy lives, even when we think we have a strategy that might work, to never really find a time to do it in a purposeful way. So I love that. I'm hoping our listeners are all listening very calmly at the moment and relaxed. But I found that, yeah, I think it's something that we don't realize how much actually just connecting and reflecting on ourselves can really empower us to do the next thing, the next challenge we have in front of us.
Yes.
I am interested though, Kailey, because you touched on it with TV and games and everything else that there is available, that as we move through the generations, we've reached a point in the world now where there are so many different technology devices, other things that shout for attention, that stimulate us in a way that sometimes way more than we need to be stimulated, certainly for children. How you kind of find there's that yin and the yang, how we can find ways that mindfulness can help counter some of that excess stimulation that's so readily acceptable and accessible for us.
The interesting thing with mindfulness is that it gives you the opportunity to think about these questions for yourself. And it gives students the opportunity to do that as well. As we become more aware of our thoughts, our feelings, our actions, we start to question, is this working for me or is it not working for me? And in the process that I explained in the classroom, where we're doing the mindfulness practice together, and then we're having a chat, what did you notice? Things like this come up. Students will say things like, oh, I've been, glued to my phone all day. It was actually really nice to just disconnect for 5 minutes. They become like, they're more aware than we think. We don't give them enough credit when we allow them that space where we are removing distractions for them, allowing them to enter kind of that bubble of checking in with themselves. They become more self-aware and are better able to recognize which habits are not serving them and empower them to know, I can make changes for myself. I don't need someone else to tell me, get off your phone, you've been playing too many video games. I can recognize in myself that this is making me feel anxious, so I'm going to back off. I have the power to do that. So, and as you said, practicing mindfulness, it's almost too easy. You're like, oh, this simple practice, we took, less than 5 minutes to do that practice. When do you have a free 5 minutes in your day? How much time are you on devices? That 5 minutes is so easy and so hard. It's like so
Exactly.
simple and so difficult. So what I really recommend, as in the classroom, if you're trying to do this for yourself, link this practice to a routine that you already have. That is how the brain creates habit, by linking it to something that's already a habit. So when I first started this practice, I sandwiched it between two parts of my morning routine. Step one, I would get my coffee started. Step two, I would brush my teeth. I would sit and do my 2-minute mindfulness practice. And in the beginning, my brain would tell me every single morning, you don't have 2 minutes. Mornings are rushed. Mornings are busy. You don't have 2 minutes. I had to force myself to get through that thought and say, I'm just going to try it. I'm just experimenting. If I'm running late, I won't put on makeup today. So I would do my 2-minute practice and then I would get my coffee. Eventually, I recognized that these 2 minutes in 24 hours were making a huge difference for me. And so my brain told me, hey, this is good. Let's do more of it. And so slowly I started building up 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, until I reached that sweet spot that felt doable, and really good in my body. And we often want to start climbing the mountain right at the, we want to get right to the top of the mountain. We have to take tiny steps, because anytime something's too big, our brain says no. Our brain hates change. Our brain says that's too much work. I don't want to create new brain connections. That uses too many calories. I want to save my calories for something else. So it's normal for your brain to say, no, I don't have time. So, but you have the option to say, well, what if I have 1 minute? 1 minute is better than 0 minutes. 30 seconds is better than 0 seconds. So start as small as you need to, so that your brain says, yes, I can do this. So I really think that just doing the mindfulness is what we need to be able to recognize when technology is taking over. When we sit with our emotions and we recognize what it feels like to feel anxious, what are those sensations in my body when I'm feeling anxious? And then we start noticing while we're playing video games, oh, there's that anxious feeling. Hey, wait a minute, playing the video games is causing the anxious feeling. Is this the right thing for me? Maybe I should make a change. It's so powerful to check in with ourselves and get to know ourselves.
Absolutely. And I'm also interested, given that you've shared that ever increasing challenge on our time, and the ability that we almost go into autopilot, and before we realize it, the device is in hand and we're scrolling through the news or seeing what friends' messages. I'm interested in how that narrative has helped shape some of your approaches within Educalme.
How the narrative of kind of wanting to reach for that phone
Yeah,
on
well,
autopilot.
recognizing that pressure of technology is ever increasing in our lives. Obviously, with Educalme, you're trying to provide those strategies that make it easy to slip it into the right routine, so that it's something that becomes embedded, I guess, into that routine as creatures of habit.
Exactly. When I started practicing mindfulness, one of the first things when I was starting to notice positive effects that I thought was, why didn't I learn this when I was a kid, when my mind was so much easier to shape, right? So when we're starting these practices, teaching them to our students when they are in school with us and they are learning how to create habits in their day, right? The way that we shape our classroom routines is going to influence how our students shape their day-to-day as adults. So if we are teaching them that, in order to start our day right, in order to get ourselves ready to do our best work, we can slow down, check in, practice mindfulness, manage our emotions, and then we do better work, that slingshot effect. If we can teach that to them young, imagine what that's going to look like in the next generation of adults going into work. We're flipping the script from the old thoughts that many of us adults now feel today, which is, I can rest once I've worked myself tired. So rest comes when I'm too tired to continue. What if we flip that and we say, if I rest first, I'm fueling my tank to be able to do better work. So when I'm in a rush and I have 1,000 things on my list to do, I can jump right in when my brain isn't ready and force myself through it and burn myself out and then sleep at the end of the day. Or I can start with a 5-minute warm up, just like an athlete's going to warm up their muscles first. Let me warm up my brain first. I'm going to start with 5 minutes, and then I'm going to go do my best work. How could that change society? Right now, it's all about burnout. Everyone's, adults, kids are all burning out right now because we have this narrative that rest is only allowed once we've worked too hard, worked ourselves to the bone. Flipping that could move mountains.
I love that because I think one of the things we always look about, something that I talk about extensively with some of my work with the OECD is we're really looking at not just the development and acquisition of knowledge in our education system, but increasingly, rightly, the focus needs to be on skills, and skills that are transferable into adult life. And the world is becoming incredibly skills based. And often we're quite dismissive of the skills that empower us to be at our full potential. And there is a cultural change between the idea that actually taking a moment and pause isn't a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of being very reflective and recognizing when that moment is beneficial to you, that pulling back of the sling. So I can see so many areas when we think about that demand that we have. Often we talk about the subjects we teach in our schools, and people say, what are the most in-demand subjects? And you say, actually, when you talk to employers, the most in-demand skills are people that are resilient, have great communication skills, have empathy, have the ability to be inquisitive and curious, and check the validity of information. Actually, the subject, the content comes quite second to those emotional traits about the human being. So I think they really, really resonate. So what I wanted to kind of query really, Kailey, and build upon was, for the last 30 years, we've developed technology in the classroom as NetSupport that's been around supporting student collaboration and management of the child from a perspective of controlling and shepherding their use of technology. And there's a very lovely parallel that runs alongside that is actually looking about how we can learn more about management of student behavior, not by the controls we put in place, but by how we actually support them with their social emotional perspectives.
Yes. So we've all seen in the classroom how when we create strict rules, students may or may not abide by those rules, right? They need to be intrinsically motivated to follow the rules. And they're always thinking, whether they say it or not, what's in it for me? What's in it for me if I'm following these rules? Is this helpful to me? Like, why do I want to do this? And that's really at the core of the Educalme kind of philosophy, is we are constantly helping our students to ask those questions. What's in it for me? Why do I care about this? How is this useful to me? And so a great conversation that we encourage teachers to have in the classroom often is, how is practicing mindfulness helping you in your real life? How is what we're teaching you useful once you leave the classroom, or once you are in the classroom? And students say things like, I've been using the breathing strategies to help me fall asleep at night because I often have a hard time falling asleep. I use the breathing strategies before my sports playoffs because I was really nervous and I needed something to help me feel calm and focused. So having these discussions of, with anything that we do in the classroom, what's in it for you, and not answering that question for them, but giving them the space to think about what's in it for me. Why do I want to learn this thing? So that narrative, that question is important for everything. Even having a discussion, if you're saying, okay, no phones in the classroom, asking the question to your students, why would it be important to not have phones in the classroom? And when you can get them to answer that question for you, then they understand the point. But if you answer that question for them, it's just someone else telling them what to do in their day full of people telling them what to do. So how do we guide our students to make good choices for themselves? And I think that self-study that happens in mindfulness is so important for that, letting them make those decisions for themselves. And it's shocking how early of an age they're able to make these good choices for themselves when we give them the space to discover why the things that we're trying to help them do is useful for them.
I love that. One of the things that really resonates with me is talking about that is one of my other roles is chair of an alternative of provision academy. So an education setting for young people from 5 through to 18 that struggled in mainstream education and often moved because of behavior management challenges or struggles with them adapting to the structure of the school day. And often there's a kind of that natural perception to have those children labeled as the disruptive, the naughty children. But almost always it ends up being children that struggle to process their emotions and express through the different challenging experiences that they've encountered through their childhood. And actually, many of the practices that I see in terms of how to find that level and support those learners, ironically, doesn't come about being more hands-on. It comes from providing more space, which resonates really with the things that you're sharing there, Kailey.
Yeah, definitely. And I think something that's important to talk about on this topic is how behavior management is a learned skill. It's something that begins in infancy that we learn. And of course, there's many different facets to behavior and why people act the way that they do. We are very complex creatures. But as teachers, I think it's really important to reflect upon what I'm seeing in my classroom is just a small piece of what's going on underneath in all of these different brains in the classroom that have developed differently and have developed different coping mechanisms based on how they have been cared for in their lives. So if we aren't taking the time to teach social emotional learning, to teach our students how to regulate their emotions, but we're expecting them to be able to do it independently, we're setting our students up for failure, and especially the students that really need our support the most. We're rewarding the students that are able to manage their behaviors because they had caregivers from a young age that modeled that regulation. And then we're punishing kids that didn't have those models that shaped their brain to be able to regulate emotion. That doesn't seem fair to me. So in a classroom, our goal is to give our students, the tools that they need in life. And sometimes those tools are things that can't be taught in the home or is challenging to teach in the home. That's our role as teachers. Social emotional learning, that self-regulation piece, is enormous on how our students have success in life afterwards. We need to give them these concrete tools before we expect them to be able to manage their behavior, because behavior is just a symptom of emotion. Behavior is what we see, the emotions on the inside. There's driving factors that are happening inside, and the emotion is just the last thing. So if we can build the brain structures, build those neural connections with our students with a daily mindfulness practice that's teaching their brain how to notice their emotion and then how to choose the behavior based on the emotion. We're teaching them that they have that choice. Emotion doesn't equal behavior. There's a space there where we can recognize the sensations in our body. And we talk about that with our students through Educalme. What does it feel like to be angry? What are the sensations you feel? Oh, well, my hands might clench into fists. My body might start to feel hot. I feel this tenseness in my muscles. That's what it feels like to be angry. Okay, when you feel that feeling, what are your options? Well, I can take some deep breaths. I can give myself some space. I can ask for support from someone that I trust to help me to manage this emotion. I don't have to hit someone. I don't have to throw something. Those are optional choices. But that only happens through the practice of feeling, what does my body feel like? And then how do I choose what comes next?
Absolutely. Well, we've had a very well-behaved discussion, and you've made no attempt to hit me or throw anything at me. So I'm going to take that as a really positive win. Before we wrap up, and I get you just to share how our listeners can find out more about Educalme. Given that you're based there in lovely Canada, I would love for you just to share perhaps one item or one thing that you think is exemplary about the Canadian education system. It's a country that I've visited many times, and we have a lovely team based in Markham, just outside of Toronto. But I would love to hear your perspective on something that you would like to kind of hold up as your exemplar for today.
Ooh, that's a
No,
interesting
no
question.
pressure.
Yeah. Well, I teach in Manitoba. That's where I am a teacher. Yet our program is used across the country, and each province has its own curriculum. So they differ slightly from province to province. Some things that I'm seeing that I'm really excited about that's starting to happen in many provinces is a focus on well-being. Well-being is a really big word in a lot of the planning for school divisions, districts, and really across the board. We're focusing on well-being. Schools are understanding now that we have to support student well-being in order to have academic success. It's not one or the other. It's not academics and then we think of well-being. We're starting now to really focus on integrating practices for well-being into our daily routines. I'd love for it to move faster,
Yeah.
because I'm always like, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's do this quicker. But I'm seeing those changes, and that's really exciting for me.
That I think is a lovely way to wrap things up. One thing that really resonates, and I love the fact that that's something that's becoming more of a priority and more of a focus, looking on a broader international level around the OECD and the PISA rankings of high performing school systems. In the same way, they are now looking towards a different measure, a school system and education that promotes human flourishing. And for me, that starts to really resonate with all the things that many have been saying around the world, at the forefront, looking after our learners, that we need to promote happy, well-rounded, resilient young people, and the rest will follow. That's the key, isn't it?
I
And on
totally agree.
the and on the point of following, how can our listeners find out about Educalme, your website, social contacts, anything you'd like to share with us, Kailey?
Yeah, so we have everything that you need at educalme.com. So that's spelled EduCalme. So you'll learn about our program there. You'll see we have a free trial for our program. So something to note is that the free trial never expires. What it does is it gives you access to the first unit of our year-long program. So this first unit, Introduction to Mindfulness, is going to teach you, the teacher, how to start this in your classroom. It's going to remove all those barriers of how do I start? What do I do first? It's all laid out for you. You're going to have at least a month worth of content there to use with your students. And then if you'd like, you can purchase the full membership, which is going to give you access to all of our content. Now, if you're like, I'm ready to start with something right now, I just want some free stuff, go to educalme.com/welcome. And we have on there a bunch of free resources, ebook, some training, our free trial, our podcast, our Instagram. There's lots of ways that we support teachers, and everything is there at educalme.com/welcome.
Fantastic. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you. I'm feeling very calm and refreshed from our conversation. I encourage all of our listeners to check out Educalme. It sounds like a fantastic resource to really, really focus on something that's such a key priority at the moment. So thank you for joining the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Al. It was great.